This is Uncommonly Remarkable, where we discuss the surprising everyday lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. My name is Artis Beatty. I am a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for MyEyeDr OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and the conversations held here are separate from my work with MyEyeDr. Welcome back to the show. We've got a very exciting episode today. Among other things, today's guest describes himself as a dad, a husband, loyal, and a connector. He played hockey, he water skis, and he says he's an average guy fitness level guru. He's currently a realtor involved in a variety of property types, and he leads a nonprofit veteran network called Raleigh Veteran Connect. And he's also involved in a startup business working towards something I'm fairly curious about. So ladies, gentlemen, all you remarkable people, please welcome Pete Marston to the show.
Thanks, Artis. Appreciate being here.
And I'm excited to have you. I know we've talked about it quite a while, and we've had some scheduled things all over the place.
Both busy guys.
So we nailed it down.
Yeah.
Nailed it down. There's so much to talk about. And, I said you are currently, because you've been involved in a lot of different things over time.
I have. It's funny. Sometimes I describe my life as a tapestry, right? And I see the front side and everybody else sees the back side. It doesn't look like things connect, but for me, they really do.
That's an interesting way to think about it, right? Because, if you flip over a tapestry, you're exactly right. You're like, well, why does it look that way?
Right.
But on the front side, it's something completely different.
Right. And I think that's the way that life should be, right? I'm living my life.
Yeah.
I'm not making it for someone else. I get to enjoy it how I want to.
Well, man, we're going to walk through a couple of things because I know more about you than some people do.
Sure.
And I want to connect some things, but I'm sure along the way you're gonna surprise me quite a bit.
We'll see.
So I always like to start from the very beginning because that's a great place to start, right? And so in your case, you grew up in a place that is a little bit different than us East Coasters, right?
Yeah.
You're from one of those states that I never really actually believed was real until I met somebody from it.
Well, that's fair enough. There's not a lot of people from Minnesota that leave. Most people that grow up in Minnesota kind of stay there. And there's some good parts to it, and there's some colder parts to it that aren't so fun. But yeah, that's fair. It's a little bit different place.
It's always funny for me because growing up on the East Coast, you get really familiar with all of the East Coast states, and really you do well all the way through the Midwest, right?
Right.
And they're all shaped different. And so like if you look at a map, you're like, oh yeah, I can pick that one out because that's Florida looks different, or Virginia is shaped like that, or that's what Maine looks like. You get farther west and they start becoming squares and rectangles, right. And then it becomes really tough.
Yeah, and North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Wyoming, Iowa.
I call them square states. Yeah. And so you just kind of, if you throw those puzzle pieces at me, I can kind of put them together, but not nearly the way I can do it here. In fact, I went to optometry school with a friend, one of my best friends from optometry school actually is from North Dakota.
Uh-huh.
That's the first person I met from North Dakota, and that validated the fact that North Dakota
Well, you should
existed.
Play the lottery then. Because once you meet someone from North Dakota, you're that's it. Yeah.
So talk about growing up a little bit though, because it was a little different, and you were out in.
Yeah. So I'm the fourth of four. I have two brothers and a sister, and I like to say I grew up in the middle of the woods on a dirt road. It sounds really rural, but I mean, the reality was I was probably 30 minutes from the city.
Yeah.
St. Paul. And it was a different world for sure. People, when they ask me about it, I try to say, well, it's kind of like a Norman Rockwell painting if you think of Minnesota. Like I grew up in this place where I had a pond in my backyard, and I'd come home from school in the winter and I would start playing hockey in the backyard on the pond. And then my mom would come and grab me, and we'd run to the outdoor rinks in town and have practice in town, and then come home and play some more. And so, when I was bored, I might put on some cross-country skis and go skiing just by myself with my dog. I mean, it was a really good place to grow up and have some freedom. You know, it was a kind of childhood. Your mom would come out in the front porch and just yell for her kids wherever they were in the ether to come home. And, you know, we might be climbing a tree or digging or hunting frogs or whatever it might be. So
I bring that up though, because you have 2 boys.
I do.
And I've kind of watched you guys give them a lot of that when you can, like you're getting them out in,
We do.
I'll call it the wilderness as much as you can.
We do. They love being outside. I mean, we come home and there's frogs and there's centipedes and there's all kind. I mean, I think Jack brought in my 4-year-old Jack brought in a snake to my wife Delora the other day. It was dead, but he brought it in and it was like, look, Mom, I found a snake. Which I'm not a huge fan of those things, but I guess they are. Yeah, we really try to give them as much of that as we can. Laura grew up in Minnesota. She grew up on a farm, you know, a few 100-acre farm, and a lot of freedom there. So we're both trying to blend those things. It's, you know, the world today is so crazy that we really just want them to be in touch with being outside and be comfortable being outside. Walk outside and it's hot. Yep, yeah. It's hot. You walk outside in the rain and yep, it's raining. Deal with it. You know, like that's the real world. So yeah, we try to do those things and be active outside. And if you do that, you can do that anywhere.
That's true. That's true. And I was actually going to ask you what life lessons you felt like you learned from having that outdoor experience. And you really just said it, right? It's real life.
Right.
It's hot. It's cold. It's raining. Like these are all things.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, you know, playing hockey outside, you know, as a kid. When you're young, the town that I was in didn't have an indoor rink. All the towns around us did, so we played inside a lot. But, you know, when you're little, and you're practicing at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, you go out to these outdoor rinks, and they're just flooded with a fire hose, essentially. And then there's a warming house right next to it. And so you go into the warming house, you get your stuff on, you go outside. But it might be 5 degrees. It might be 10 degrees outside. You know, you might be wearing a face mask underneath your helmet and like big turtlenecks and everything. I remember my dad telling me one time or asking me, like, why are you going inside so much more than the other kids? You keep coming. I mean, it was probably 5 degrees. I mean, it was cold, right? and I was cold. My fingers hurt, my toes hurt, you know, those kinds of things. And later in life, I realized like my mom had Raynaud's and I'm like, oh, I think I'm pretty much, now that explains why my feet hurt so much more. But in that, there was a lesson of just dealing with it, right? That you can't, you're not going to change it. So just deal with it and move on.
Which I think is one of those things that the earlier you can understand the things that you are able to change versus those things that you really need to figure out how to deal with, is it that the better you are at problem solving and being able to face some of the difficulties that just naturally come.
Right. That was a lot of my childhood, was being thrown into interesting environments like that and figuring it out.
You know, we have talked a variety of times, and when I first met you, full disclosure, I met you at the gym.
Right.
You were coaching one of the classes that I regularly attended early in the morning at CrossFit RDU, and I found it fascinating as you started to talk about your early career, including your time spent in the Army.
Right.
So the story about your enlisting, I think, is one of those that is very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah. So just a little for the record, as an officer, you don't enlist. You just
true.
You sign. It's a little bit different.
Yes.
You contract to become an officer, but nonetheless. So I was an ROTC guy in college. I had attempted to go to West Point or Air Force Academy and those kind of places, and was planning on playing hockey at each one of those places, and had the opportunity to do that, but I actually broke my C1 vertebrae in high school, and so those seats kind of went away, and I ended up playing hockey at a smaller liberal arts school and using an ROTC scholarship, and September 11th was my senior year of college. So, September 11th, 2001, I'd been back to school for maybe a week. I remember being in class and I had seen, the news. I had an 8 a.m. class or 9 a.m. class, whatever it was. And I'd seen the news, saw a plane went into the World Trade Center. And then, we heard in class that something else happened. They stopped the class and I went to the student center where they had, TVs up, and I walked in and towers were collapsing. And right then I knew that my life had changed dramatically from everybody else around me. Because, ROTC at my school was not big. There was probably 10 of us, So everybody there is just a Midwestern kid that's going to go back and work in Minneapolis or St. Paul. And, I was one of very few people connected to the military in that way. So, and I was a 4-year scholarship kid at the time. So I was committed that I had to go serve, right after. I didn't have any choice. So, and it's what I wanted to do. I mean, I wanted to be there, but to my senior year of college took on a little different shape in terms of where my focus was and where I want to be. And funny story, when I became when you get done with ROTC, you get commissioned, just like at West Point or wherever else. We all end up second lieutenants in the Army.
Okay.
And part of the Pentagon that had been hit on September 11th had the ROTC Accessions Command. So the place where your packets go to determine where do you go in the Army, right? Do you become a logistician? Do you go become transportation? Do you go to artillery? Do you go to the infantry? Do you become an aviator? All of those things. And you get to choose, you say, hey, here's 16 branches of the Army. And you get to say, okay, what are my top ones? And obviously an order of merit list is used to kind of figure it out. So I was one of the top rated cadets in our entire region, right?
Wow.
So,
okay.
I mean, like not a huge deal, right? But for the context of this, so I had somehow ended up with my 16th choice. I was like, which was chemical corps. It's like, you got to be kidding me. And I knew a guy. My brother had been working. He was an Air Force Special Operations guy. Okay. And he had introduced me to a guy named Colonel Thomas. He was the first group commander, first Army Special Forces group commander out at Fort Lewis. And that's where my brother was. And he said, oh, you should meet this guy. And I went out there on a spring break and I met this guy. He gave me his card and he said, if you ever have any problem, any challenge, call me. So I was like, I got this card. And so I called him and he was real short. And I said, I don't know what happened. And he said, let me make some phone calls. And this is like 3 months before graduation, 4 months before graduation. Right. And long story short, when I was pinned a second lieutenant, and they were about to put on my chemical corps insignia on my uniform to make me a chemical corps officer, they pulled up and showed me crossed rifles, which are infantry, which is what I wanted. And they pinned them on me. I didn't know at that time. I didn't know if anything was going to happen or not. So anyway, it's an interesting story.
Did you ever find out how you ended up in chemical corps? Like what happened if it was 16?
That's a good question. So I think, this is all third-hand information, right? Okay. So like I can't verify exactly what happened. But the gist of the story, I think, was because everything was such a mess, what they did is they allowed some of the branches of the Army that had trouble getting a lot of interest.
Oh, I see.
Have some free picks. So it was like being drafted in the end, and you're like, really? I'm going to the worst team in the league? And no offense to chemical corps guys. There's some great guys out there, but I didn't want to be there. And that was kind of what they told me happened was, hey, you just got sucked into this thing. And
I see. So now I have 2 levels of curiosity. The first is now I got to figure out what all the 16 are. So I'm going to go look that up so I can understand that.
Sure.
And then specifically, I want to know what the chemical core is doing. Because now my imagination is all over the place with what they might be.
Well, I'll let you figure that out. Because it's suffice it to say, because there's not a lot of chemical weapons being used, right, or being used against us, at least in volume. They get used to do a lot of things that other people just don't want to do. So they become administrative assistants to a command group often. So they're tracking down stuff that nobody else wants to do.
Oh no!
Yeah. So you don't want no. Yeah. So you have all this knowledge, you go to school for all this stuff, and then you can't use it because there's not really, basically if that guy says something, you should probably listen to him about chemical stuff.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nobody's listening to him.
So what did it look like for you post 9/11? How long were you in the infantry, and then what happened?
So I stayed on active duty from 2002 to 2000, basically December 2007.
Okay.
Is when I left active duty, and I stayed in the reserve for about 2 years after that. But I went to Fort Benning, went to infantry officer basic course, went to Ranger School, was hurt at Ranger School, and this is 2003, right?
Okay.
So we went into Iraq in February, March of 2003. That's about when I was going into Ranger School. But I had a knee injury in infantry officer basic course that I was trying to rehab. In fact, I went over to the basic training units while I was trying to rehab this. They gave me some time to try to heal it.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a doctor that would give me cortisone shots. So I was trying, this guy was giving me cortisone.
Excellent plan.
Yeah. He was giving me cortisone shots every week for every other week for just to get the swelling down because I had to go to Ranger School. Right.
Wow.
And then I went over to the Ranger School. I hunted down the PA over there, the guy who's in charge of all the, everything, and kind of told him what was going on and say, I'm going to show up on your doorstep here in a few weeks. And what kind of drugs can you give me while I'm in school? Because I need to make it through this thing. And he looked at me and said, don't come to Ranger School if your knee's hurt. I went, well, I don't have a choice. I mean, it's expected of me. So I went, and within a week and a half, I couldn't even bend my knee anymore. And I didn't drop. They just pulled me out. And which is really disheartening for a young, because it's a big step for an infantry officer to have that. But at the time, they just said, you're going to go to Fort Drum. And, and the Army's infinite wisdom was, here, go to a unit that's deploying in the next 6 months. You'll be fine. So I didn't really heal anything. I just went right to Fort Drum at 10th Mountain Division, and within a few months, I was deploying to go to Iraq. I didn't know if we were originally going to go to Afghanistan, and we were going to go to Iraq, and I had been engaged to Laura at the time.
I was actually going to ask you because my memory said that there was.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we were engaged, and I mean, this is like an old school, World War II or Vietnam story, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were engaged, didn't know when I was going to leave. So we just finally looked at each other and said, let's just go get married at the courthouse, because you'll have access to more information and that kind of stuff. So, and, this is kind of we don't have Snapchats or anything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're not it's pretty Spartan communication.
Yeah.
So it would allow her access to more information. So we got married.
That makes so much sense. Okay. Yep.
We got married underneath the flagpole at the Watertown, New York courthouse. They gave us the option of getting married. We walked into the office, right? And they had arches, with fake flowers and some Christmas lights on them. And they're like, we can pull that out, or we can go outside to the flagpole. I'm like, we'll go outside to the
Flagpole.
Flagpole it is. So we went outside and we went on our first honeymoon to Ottawa, right? Big metropolis of Ottawa. We went to Ottawa because I had to leave. I think it was the next week that I was leaving. So it was that was kind of the start to the Army journey.
Wow. So, I always want to know, as people think about the segments of their lives. So to me, this is a segment, right? And so when we have these segments, we generally bring from those segments something that we carry with us to the next one. So whether it's a life lesson, it's I must always do this, I must never do that. We take something from each segment and we build the next one. What did you take from your time spent in the Army?
Whew, man. I mean, there's a lot that happened from where we just left off to the time that I left the Army.
Yeah.
I was talking to a Vietnam veteran the other day. He's a client of mine, actually. And he was a Marine infantry guy in 1969 in Vietnam, and pretty rough place that he was in. And we hadn't talked about it at all, and he calls me up and we were talking about something. He says, "Hey, by the way, you were in the Army, right?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he says, "You were infantry, right?" I said, "Yes, sir." And he says, "Good." Real gruff guy, right?
Yeah.
Real nice, but just blunt. And then he says, "Tell me something. What do you use from being an infantry officer every day?" And I said, "There isn't a minute that goes by, probably not a second that goes by, that isn't somehow influenced by the development that I had as a young infantry officer. There's just no way. I mean, I was thrown in my feet into the fire. I mean, when we went to Iraq, I went right to Fallujah, and that was in September 2003. It was a pretty dangerous place at the time, and I was not a good leader early on. And I wasn't that I was bad. It was that I wasn't experienced enough in leadership to really lead the way that I needed to right away. And I realized that, I mean, there were some NCOs that let me know that, some non-commissioned officers that not in a gentle way pointed me in the right direction. And eventually, after a few months, I really started to kind of hit my stride and figure it out. But, I really learned a lot about how to, for lack of a better term, lead and not be an overbearing leader, right? Because that's not what's needed in that environment. You need a collaborative leader, and to understand what my role was as a leader. And I really started to embrace the idea that my job is no more important than the youngest private that I'm in charge of or leading. I just have a different set of tasks. And these are my tasks in this bucket over here. And I need to integrate those with the people that I'm leading. And I need their feedback and they need my feedback. And we need to work together to really make this happen. And in that environment, it's literally life or death.
Yeah.
And I learned how to plan and how to organize and how to trust but verify. I'll never forget, we were wrapping up an operation, a fairly complex operation. And we were driving back to our forward operating base. The sun's coming up and the palm trees, and we're down by the Euphrates River. And, it's just kind of like the calm after all this high intensity. And I'll never forget this feeling and this thought that I had. And I realized I never once commanded anybody during this operation. I never once picked up my hand mic to tell somebody, go here, do this, do that. And it was an intricate, dynamic environment. It wasn't static, like go here, sit there, and then go here and go there. There was a lot of thinking and maneuvering that had to happen. And I had been checking on my guys through the whole thing. And I realized this is what leadership is. That I spent the time, a ridiculous amount of time before collaborating with my team, coming up with a plan, thinking through contingencies, understanding the risks. How do we mitigate those risks? What do we happen when something doesn't go right? And realizing that if I can replicate this feeling and this wherever I go, if I can replicate this, I'll be successful as a leader wherever I go. That this is what it's all about, and it's just in a Humvee, watching the sunrise, going, oh my God, this probably one of the biggest life lessons that I've ever had.
You said a couple of things that I just want to go back and say again. I mean, it is rare to have the realization that you're not an effective leader in the environment where you're leading, right? And so, we all could be so fortunate to have people give you immediate feedback on whatever the situation is, and in your case, the leadership style. That doesn't always happen. Now, most of us are never in a life and death situation where we are charged with leading,
right?
Which is a very unique position to be in. But we also very rarely realize it in the moment that we are leading, that we're not being as effective as we could be. It's usually a look back. Right. And so it's an interesting realization to be able to understand that in the moment and then make correction rather than having to look back and say, I wish I would have.
Right. I think it was a product of going back to just how I grew up, and I was never a leader really growing up. I was always good at whatever I was doing. I was doing well at school. The only reason I did well at school is because I tried hard, right? I wasn't a naturally gifted student. I just figured out how I learn and figure out how to do well. Same thing in sports. I mean, I was never really like the natural hockey player or I did well because I worked hard. Mm-hmm. And that's how I kind of got by. There's a point in life where working hard only gets you so far. And you have to adapt to that environment or you won't succeed. And that's what was happening. And I realized really fast that it didn't matter. Nobody cared that I was a good guy, that I had this good upbringing and this nice family, or this, nobody cared.
Yeah.
We just want to survive today.
Right.
One of the things that kind of goes along with that, it was like the first experience that I was being shot at, right? Just the story, it's not gruesome or anything. The first time I was ever shot at, our company, 140 soldiers moving across the city across Fallujah, from one side of Fallujah to the other side of Fallujah to live and operate on the other side. And we were moving at night. So it was kind of heavy, right? All of our stuff. We've got some big trucks with us and our Humvees. And so we're kind of a heavy unit lumbering around, So we're trying to do this as quietly as we can.
In the dark.
On the south side of Fallujah, you drive across a bunch of kind of desert and then get to this edge of the town. And there's a road on the side of the town. You kind of skirts the southern end of town.
Okay.
Or the city. And there's a wall right there. So you kind of drive right up to it, hang a left, and start going around the city to get to the other side, to cross the Euphrates River. And, it was midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, I don't know, dark. And I was in the apex of this turn. We've got 20 vehicles along and call me number 10.
Okay.
And I'm in the apex of this turn. And as I turn, somebody with like an AK-47 reaches over the wall and shoots right there. And within a second, at almost the same time, my mind went to, oh my God, this is going to hurt. I was scared out of my mind, right? A second later, a couple of machine guns from a second story building start shooting at our column. And our guys just unleash, right? So there's red tracers going one way and green tracers going the other way. And I'm trying to pick up my hand mic to do something, to do whatever an infantry officer is supposed to do, right? And I'm so scared that I can't even talk. I can't even say anything. I can barely breathe. And, the firing dies down. We pull out of that, kill zone, and nobody was killed or wounded or anything. And within a minute, I thought to myself, never again am I going to be so scared to act that I'm going to put other people at risk or myself at risk, I will never do that again. Take that to business.
Yeah.
To, you have to be prepared. I didn't jump into that environment unprepared.
That's right. That's right.
Like it wasn't like I was just doing something willy-nilly that was risky. I was doing it and I had the background to do it. But when I got there, I was too scared to actually do it. So when you think about life lessons, the lessons of leadership, the lessons of risk, when to push and when not to push, and all of those things, are lessons that I learned, in the Army.
It's interesting to think about how you take those with you, right? And I think, again, it's not necessarily comparable because most people will never be in an environment where people are physically shooting at them, right? But people do have those instances where they fail to act, not because they're unprepared, but because they're not sure exactly what to do in the situation, and so they don't do anything.
When in doubt, often the best thing is to do is to just start doing something.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's not true, but I mean, often it is.
Well, particularly if you're in a situation for which you have been trained or prepared to be in, right? And it really is different whenever you're making the decision and you've got to live with the consequences of that decision. And the first time you do anything, particularly something new, you're really taking a risk, right? And some people respond to that risk the very first time and they go. But I think those are the people who have learned from previous experience that to do nothing is likely not the best. It's not going to lead to the best outcome.
Yeah. I mean, Army doctrine, right, is if you're in an ambush, turn in the ambush and go head first into it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, don't sit there and try to figure it out. Just go on the attack.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just start moving.
And it's probably based in experience and countless outcomes, but it's also based in human response, right? Because once you begin to respond, you are able to unlock parts of your brain where you actually get the training to actually come back to you. You're able to think in the action.
Absolutely.
But if you don't start the response, which is what they're trying to get you to do, you can't do any of that.
Exactly. I mean, that's when I left the Army, right, in December 2007. This kind of goes into the tapestry of my life, right?
Yeah.
I became a project manager in clinical research, right? Leading clinical research projects for pharma companies. And I did that, right? A career. I had 13 years. I ended up a director of project management in clinical research. And
I met you in this stage. Because I thought it was fascinating. Like the putting together all these things I thought was just very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I had no science background whatsoever. Zero. Like my last science class was in high school. Sitting here talking to a doctor, he's probably like just mortified. But people ask me, how'd that happen? It's pretty raw in terms of how it happened. I mean, I was visiting some soldiers at Walter Reed. I thought I might be getting out soon, and there was a job fair for military officers in D.C. And so I went to this job fair and just kind of kicking around, seeing what's out there. I didn't go there with any real purpose. And I ended up meeting this guy. His name was, two guys. One, Jim Beha, was a former, I think he was actually a chemical corps officer, to be honest with you. And he was working at the time, and he was like a project manager, and he was working at INC Research, and he had been there for a couple of years. He was a colonel when he got out, so it was a little different. I was a captain. And Jeff Kiefer, and Jeff was an Army colonel who got out, in the probably mid-90s or something. He was an armor officer, so tanker. And he ended up somewhere along the line linking up with some friends that were in the clinical research space, I think back at Quintiles or something before that. And they had hired some guys back when some of those companies were small to help do some strategic work for them, and operational, kind of organize, how do we run our business? How do we actually manage projects, right? So he was kind of involved in some of that. Never really did the project management work, just kind of managed that. And later on, Jeff became kind of he was the VP of, maybe executive VP of global operations at Syneos, which, so big CRO in town. So INC was Syneos. So INC grew into Syneos.
Oh.
Through mergers and acquisitions and new naming and stuff. So INC at the time was pretty small. And, while there was a couple of Army guys around, I was pretty much one of one. I mean, there was nobody like me. And there's no training program. There's no like, hey, this is the book and how we do it.
Yeah.
It was just figure it out. I felt like I was back in Fallujah, right?
Literally thinking, figure it out.
Yeah, figure it out. And Jeff came into my office one day, and I share this with a lot of the veterans that I interact with now who are getting out. And he came in my office and he said, Pete, what's the difference between clinical research and combat operations? And mind you, I'd been there for 2 weeks. And Jeff's a pretty rhetorical guy, so I had no idea how I was going to answer his question. And finally, I just looked at him and said, Jeff, nobody's trying to kill me. And I think that's pretty awesome right now. like nobody's trying to kill me. This is great. And he says, no, it's the nouns. The verbs are the same.
Huh.
I said, it's just the nouns. And I said, it might take you a while to learn the nouns, but just go learn the nouns. And at the time, I mean, it kind of made sense, but it has made way more sense in retrospect. And when I look back, I think he is 100% correct that once I was able to learn the nouns, I could then see how they connected. And then I could manage and I could lead the way that I knew that I could. And it took a while. I mean, people looked at me like, how the heck did you get here? Like, what? And there was no like, there were people that put up with me and put up with my questions.
Yeah.
But that's the only way. I mean, I just kept working at it and working at it and working at it, working at it and learning it. I mean, I was leading a pretty challenged study within 3 months of being there. I mean, I was faking it. I mean, I would call up a data manager and say, hey, the timeline shows that this thing is supposed to happen in the next 2 weeks. Do you have what you need from the biostatistician or from the coder that links into this on the MS project chart? And I wouldn't even have any idea what I'm talking about. I would just be looking at this timeline and saying, hey, does this make sense? And then they would tell me. And then I would kind of gain that context and I'd think, okay, you need to get, they'd say, oh, no. That actually should be linked to this. And we should be getting that this time or that time. So then I would change the project chart and then I would reevaluate and I would just spend my day on the phone calling people and like checking on them and saying like, do they have what they need? And that's how I learned. But yeah, I mean, it worked.
Yeah. You mentioned the guys getting out that you work with now. So can you talk a little bit about the Raleigh Veteran Connect and like how this came about? And just, I wasn't aware. Yeah.
Fast forward, I moved over to what was PRA Health Sciences. And I had a leader in HR that came to me and said, Pete, we want to hire more veterans like you. We want more, essentially more leadership and that kind of thing. Like, how do we hire more veterans? And I said, well, it's really easy. Go to Fort Bragg, go to Camp Lejeune, bring a net. They're letting them out every day. You can get as many as you want. So the problem is you're asking the wrong question. Because what happened with me is not scalable. You can't just take a bunch of guys and throw them in here and make it grow. So I ended up then leading a veteran transition program in that company. I said, okay, great. Sounds like you know what to do. Maybe you should lead this. So I did. And it was pretty successful. Transitions were way better than what I had. And one of the things that I learned when I was hiring veterans was they lack a lot of context. So just like I, for years, kind of wondered, was I in the right job? Did I actually, did I love my job in clinical research? No, I didn't. But I was decent at it and I was successful and that felt good.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, they get out and they've been in the military for 20 years and they've been doing incredible things. And they have a wide variety of options. They have tons of talent. I mean, the things that I see from people it would blow your mind, like the things that some of these people are doing. And they literally have lots of options, but their problem is they don't understand enough to be able to say, yeah, that's a good fit for me. I like to compare it to the cereal aisle in the grocery store. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you've never had cereal before. And you walk into that aisle first time and you're supposed to pick the right cereal for you.
Yeah.
And all you have is marketing managers coercing you and telling you how wonderful their cereal is. And you think, man, Lucky Charms, that sounds great. You know, Fruity Pebbles. Who doesn't love Fruity Pebbles?
Right.
Like, I mean, I'm going to eat that every day. If I can eat that every day, awesome. Sounds good. But after 6 weeks, you're like, maybe that wasn't such a good idea.
Yeah.
And that kind of happens a lot. So I left clinical research, became a realtor. We can talk about that if you want. But when I left, I kept getting phone calls from people that said, and people would say, hey, Pete, I hear you know. And I'd grown a decent network, right? Mm-hmm. So I knew, my wife's in consulting. I knew people around town. I knew, people at Cisco, Lenovo, in different consulting companies. And so I would get a lot of phone calls from people on their way out saying, hey, do you know a guy? Or what can you tell me about this industry? I heard you just have a good perspective on things. So I would do that. And finally, I realized I was one guy. Mm-hmm. I'm only one guy. There's only so much I can share. And so I started looking around in Raleigh for a veteran network that was focused on high performers, right? People who are getting out and want to continue to perform at a high level. And there are a few things around. There's, but most of them are attached to specific pedigree of veterans. So it might be an Annapolis veteran group or a West Point veteran group or Marine, MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Group or something like that. There are these little segmented things around. But I'd run into so many people that were really talented that weren't from that background. They were an ROTC guy that went to a small school in Minnesota that just ended up doing really well and unlike me, stayed in for a long time and did incredible things.
Right.
And they were a transportation officer, but they were moving the things that they were moving around the world and how they were doing it and coordinating with different countries in and out and
gave them logistics training that no one would be able to
correct.
duplicate.
And an ability to understand how to interact in not just related to logistics. I mean, when I ask guys all the time, one of the questions that comes up in interviews with veterans all the time is essentially, why do you think that you can do this if you've never done this before? Why do you think that you can lead a clinical research project if you were an infantry officer? And most of those, when I'm talking to veterans, I ask them this question: how often were you trained for the thing that you actually did in the military?
Yeah.
And they laugh. Every one of them laughs. And they're like, I was trained for about 20% of what I did.
Yeah.
The rest of it, I just had to figure it out. And I said, well, look at how successful you've been, right? In every one of those environments, you've been successful.
Yeah.
So your answer to that question to that interviewer is, well, if I've had this success and I've had this same thing happen to me 7 times in my 20-year career, why would I not continue to be successful in a new environment?
It's a great point, right? And it's one of those things that I think a lot of people take for granted. And it actually is not an unpopular interview question, but it is probably unfairly asked of people who may not have the let's say, paper experience for whatever it is that they're being tasked to do.
Right.
So you remember A Few Good Men?
Yeah.
You remember when Noah Wiley's on the stand and he's being questioned by Tom Cruise?
Yeah.
And like it's literally that same thing, right? Like there's no code red in the book.
Yeah.
But there's also no mess hall in the book. And
Right.
he's like, well, how do you know when to eat? Well, I guess I just follow the people at chow time, right?
Yeah.
Like there's stuff that you have that is paper stuff, and there's stuff that you are able to do because you have experience doing other things. And there's an intersection of those that sometimes people take for granted.
100%. Yeah, that's I even tell soon to be veterans, if you're in an interview and you sense that question, you just ask it for them. You just take it off the table for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because often they may feel uncomfortable asking you. And what will happen is if they feel uncomfortable and they don't ask you, they're going to leave and there's going to be a question in their mind. That question, if you sense it, it needs to be answered. Yeah. Whether or not they ask it or not.
And whether or not it's verbalized.
So you just kind of get them to ask it. And if they don't, you say, what I hear you saying is, how can I do this? Is that correct? And then often the interviewer is like, yes. Because it takes it off of them.
Yeah. Because they're spending their time figuring out how they're going to ask that question.
Correct.
So you looked at an N of 1, and you're trying to figure out, how do I scale this? And I think you said there's 1,200.
Yeah, almost 13. Yeah, 1,200 veterans in the network.
Wow.
It is all organic, 100% organic. We just became a nonprofit. I did not set out to. I laugh and I tell even the people in our network, I have no strategic plan for this, none. I have one goal, and that's to connect high-performing veterans to information that they need in order to make decisions and or to find hidden opportunity. That's it. And we do that through connecting with each other because we understand what we have done. So about 50% of this network is our veterans who are out of the military and in the local area already working, sharing their experience. And about 50% are on their way out. And it's primarily senior NCOs and officers. So it doesn't really suit itself well for junior enlisted just because unless they're unique and they have, a bachelor's degree and they kind of understand some leadership tenets and things like that already, just because that's not really my network, right?
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, so we meet, and the network, we have events. Our events are really dynamic. So, guys walk in, gals walk in, and somebody's right there saying, hey, where are you at in your journey? And I have general officers that come that are hanging out with, E7s, that are senior enlisted guys, and the senior enlisted veteran is telling the general officer, hey man, this is what you need to do, or this is where you need to go, or tell me about what you're thinking about. Here's my experience. So it's really cool to see how much information is shared, and how much it helps. Every single time I leave, I get people coming to me and telling me, this is the best event that I've been to in transitioning from the military, because I get raw information, and like nowhere else can I get this kind of information to say, here's the bad part about clinical research. Here's what I didn't like, but here's what I did like. So
that's pretty incredible.
So like they're for a lot of military guys, I tell them it's very much like targeting in the military. When you're working up targets, as an infantry guy or special operations or whatever it might be, you're taking bits and pieces of unconnected information and coming up with ideas and thoughts around that information that lead you to a target without a presupposed position, right? kind of like being in a jury, right? I'm going to listen to all the information. I'm going to pull it all in. And over time, that information is going to create a picture for me.
Yeah.
So I've given these guys and these gals a platform to go out and pull in unconnected information. Somebody from Cisco, or somebody that is in a startup business, or somebody that's working clinical research, or somebody that's working in logistics, or somebody that's whatever. And they can, do I want to sell, or do I want to work at a PMO? Or do I want to be a project manager, or do I want to be in some kind of marketing, role? And so it really, really, really helps these guys and gals to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, we just keep growing. We're trying to start a veteran. I've had a lot of companies that have come to me and said, hey, we want a similar network because we want to share resources with each other and ideas about how to take these high performing veterans and launch their careers. So if we're at, a named, these are bigger companies, named companies in town, they're looking at each other saying, we need to share how we're doing this. And I can get something, if I'm at SAS, I want to talk to the guy at Google, and I want to talk to the person at Cineos, and then I want to talk to the person at Cisco. And I want to network with those people because I know that there is this huge pool of leadership that's sitting on my doorstep that if I can put that into my organization,
right,
it can be really, really effective. And I just don't want to screw that up. How do I? And so it's pretty cool. Like we're kind of starting to head in that direction as well.
I think that itself is just remarkable. Because it didn't start as this is what I'm going to do. I'm launching this on purpose. It became, to your point, organic, and now you're able to look back and see the direction and kind of think about where you want it to go and how you want to involve other people. And I just think that in and of itself, that's remarkable. So before we go, I do have one more thing that I want you to touch on specifically.
Sure.
Is in our pre-work, you talked about there is a startup that you're involved with, and I just thought that the premise was interesting. So can you tell me a little bit about the startup and what is being developed or what is being aimed to be developed?
Right. So the business name, it's really a single product.
Okay.
But it's under the name of a business. The name of the business is Advanced Non-Lethal Technology.
Okay.
It's a handful of people involved in that business. My hands have been touched on the product side and just a little bit of the user use of it. I've helped them with a little bit of funding here and there. And, if hopefully when this really takes off, I'll have a little bit of a role in the growth of that business, kind of on the operational side of things, right?
The tapestry.
Yeah, the tapestry. So, yeah, exactly. So my role right now is fairly minimal, right? But it is a really interesting product. So it's an aerosol generator, creates a massive amount of smoke, essentially, but it's aerosol. Mm-hmm. It is essentially an RC jet engine turned around with some sprayers in front of it that at a real fine level, that liquid is a really small particle size. Mm-hmm. So then when the heat hits it, it creates a huge plume of smoke, right? And so what's interesting is that it's a man-portable device. It can be static.
Okay.
It's a better mousetrap. Mm-hmm. So the way that smoke is deployed in riots or in tactical environments today is often through a canister, pull the pin, throw it, and you've probably seen on TV where somebody picks it up and throws it back.
Yeah.
Or kicks it.
Yeah.
Right? Those things are also burning, right? So they're burning really hot.
Yeah.
Right? So, or they're launching them out of a gun, right? Like a gun that shoots it into a crowd, like they launch it, mm-hmm. right? Now you're launching a burning projectile into a crowd. Well, if you want to spice up a crowd, hit somebody with one of those.
Yeah.
So this is directional. So you're not launching it at anybody. And, you know, it's just inert, essentially. I mean, CS or pepper or whatever can be added to it. But and most domestic, you know, uses would just be inert for the most part, but a big plume of smoke. So you really can't even see through it. So it just kind of disperses. And the idea is to save lives, really, right? Is to de-escalate things and be able to do it more effectively.
My brain automatically goes to all of the other uses, including but not limited to creating smoke screens for pushing out like James Bond. But like, there's a lot of things. Like
there are some. Trust me, the amount of people that we have engaged on this thing. So the owner of the business essentially owns all the patents for this.
Oh, okay.
International patents as well. So we have a very large backlog of interested buyers all over the place, you know, all around the world.
I would imagine.
Yeah. And some of those are in Hollywood, right? Because they want to use it for that. I mean, but, you know, most of it, that's not at volume. Most of it is, I mean, you think even static protection, static sites, embassies, things like that can be used. It can be put into those environments, put on vehicles, put on drones, put all over the place. And so the only thing holding this back, it is ready for the next step. It just needs a production model.
Yeah.
And it's the funding for the production model in order to get it over the hump. As soon as we have that, all bets are off. But we've got prototypes that working prototypes, but nobody wants to jump in until they touch the final product.
Which is typical.
Right.
But that's very exciting.
Yeah.
To hear about new products is always interesting for me, but this one has lots of practical applications and probably lots of practical implications as well. And so the Hollywood aspect is kind of fun because I'm sure they're always looking for ways to make things look different and be more realistic and safer for the purposes of doing filming. But the reality of it is, to your point, not having to launch hot burning objects into a crowd that you're trying to calm down makes a lot more sense. Right.
And they can't kick it back. So like it actually works. It's out there, and you know it's you can turn it on and you can turn it off. You know what I mean? Once you pull the pin and you throw the grenade, it's going until it's done. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a lot. It's a really cool thing to be around and be involved with. It's not something. I met this guy at his garage like 4 years ago. You know, just literally 9:00 at night. Met him in his garage and realized, wait a minute, you have something here.
The best things come out of garages.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. I couldn't believe I was standing there at this guy's garage, and like talking about where this thing could really go, and the people that are involved, and the scale of it, of where it. I mean, it could be, hopefully here shortly, grows substantially.
And well, I'm looking forward to hearing about it. You know, it has been great to just actually get and sit and talk to you. I mean, we had some conversation beforehand, and
sure,
it's interesting to me how sometimes you go a long time between seeing people, and some folks you just kind of pick up where you left off, right? Yeah. And other folks you're always trying to start over. And I don't think we've ever had that trying to start over moment, but it is neat to kind of catch up with you about all these things that have happened over the course of your time on the planet.
So. Yeah, well, I really appreciate being able to share and listening to some of your podcasts in the past, just some of your guests. It's interesting, right? It's just,
that's good. A big compliment.
It's interesting to learn, just for the sake of learning about what somebody else's journey has been.
And that's what I hope people are getting out of it, because I'm extremely curious about what everybody else does and why they do it and when did they do it and what led to it. Mm-hmm. And I'm a very regimented person, but I devote part of my day every day to learning something new. Uh-huh. And so I'm hoping that through these conversations, other people are getting to learn something new during their day.
Yeah.
So if you found this to be very interesting and you enjoyed the time you spent, then make sure you tell your friends, make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll keep you informed as best we can. But until next time around, stay remarkable, and thank you for spending time with Uncommonly Remarkable.